right, everyone, thanks for holding. Looks like we got enough people to get started. Thank you again for registering and attending today's presentation, Man versus Mobile. We're going to talk about how to navigate through the BI mobile dashboard jungle with some proven survival techniques. This is the same presentation and demo I gave at MicroStrategy World this past January down in Miami. Except for today, I'm joined with a different customer, Teralytics Group, with Peter Seifert, and he's going to give you a demo of an app we helped build for them. I'd recommend that you guys, if you haven't already, we have a dashboard survival guide that talks largely about some dashboard design best practices that we follow at Lancet. If you haven't already downloaded it, feel free to do so. It's a free download, completely educational, and I think beneficial to your own development. And you can do that at lancetsoftware.com/dashboards. So, without further ado, I say we can get started here. So here's a brief agenda of what we're going to go over today. We're going to just do a quick introduction between myself and Peter. We're going to talk about some things that you're going to take away from today's presentation. And we're also going to talk about some design techniques for mobile app dashboards so that you can take away and know the difference between what a web dashboard is and what a mobile dashboard is. Peter from Teralytics will give a live working demonstration of a dashboard we built using an iPad. And at the very end, we'll have a questions and answers segment. So at any time you guys have questions, feel free to post them. We probably won't address them until the very end unless we think that it's something quick we need to talk about. But for sure we want to make sure we answer any questions you guys may have. So my name is Mike Erickson, and what I do at Lancet is I am the lead dashboard design specialist. I lead a team of designers here that our primary focus is on the usability and experience of BI dashboards. And we also focus, what that means is we also focus on the overall aesthetic appeal and the graphic design behind it. I've worked with Lancet since 2005, where I originally started as a web and graphic designer. As a web designer, I feel that I think it was a good segue to go from web design to business intelligence dashboard design. And I say that because largely doing web design, it was much about designing user interfaces and a portal basically for engaging user experience. And so all that's changed is the design medium from a website to now business intelligence. And I also want to say that I make this little note that my educational background's in it. It's something I've always enjoyed doing, graphic design. It's a life passion of mine, and it's something that I'm enthusiastic about. It's something I look forward to doing every day, and I like to bring that to work with me. And I'd like to let Peter take a few minutes and introduce himself and Teralytics.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Peter Seifert. I am one of the owners here, but also I call myself the geek wrangler, that keeping all the PhDs and the different people kind of headed in the right direction, right? That we all are kind of data geeks here, and we love to dive down and understand things better. So one of the things I do is kind of keep us on track, both from a business development standpoint, but also from a working the project standpoint as well. So my background is in consumer durable goods. Had a history of everything from working for Hallmark cards all the way up through retail on the bedding side. So it's nice to have that manufacturing and retail perspective. Went to graduate school at Purdue, so that might tell you that I like analytics, kind of the engineering bit there as well. A little bit about Teralytics Group and what do we do, right? What we've been able to be very successful at is forecasting, right? Is that we take the local economy and we build that economy up to predict store performance, right? To predict industry performance, to predict sales performance. Right, we can measure our accuracy and tell people what we do. It's really been a lot of fun. That we are using a lot of advanced mathematics, but we're also taking the economy and applying the economy to each business that we work with. So really what that means is that if anyone's been in finance or one of those roles, is you try to say, why is my business moving, right? What's driving my business? And we all say, hey, the economy is impacting me, but it's hard to measure. It's hard to know why, right? And that's where Terra Literature has really been able to carve out a niche for ourselves, right? The boutique kind of forecasting service is that we can tell you exactly how much the economy is impacting your store performance, right? And we help our partners. So we work with Best Buy, we work with General Mills, we work with Whirlpool Appliances, and eBay's even using our data set as well, right? To better understand their ability to say, hey, where am I experiencing organic growth, and where am I really truly making a difference? Where are my managers? Where are my stores? And so what we really help people do is understand the economy. When you understand the economy, then you can understand the opportunity. And that's something that's great about the app that Lancet built for us, is it really begins, it's hard to see it's easy to understand the concept that all economies are different. It's hard to visualize that sometimes. And the app that we're going to walk through today does a great job of visualizing that and then diving down into that detail, right? Because the people we work with like the data as well.
Great. Well, thanks, Peter. So I'd like to talk about some things what you're going to take away today. Presumably, we're all business intelligence people, and we understand that the numbers and the analytics are the important part of the dashboard. And I'm not here to argue otherwise. In fact, I totally agree with you, but there is more than just the numbers to dashboard development. There's also the user experience and the aesthetics involved. And we're seeing now the way the BI industry going is it's starting to lean into that fact that there's so much information to consume. The ability to do it quickly and intuitively and engage the user in a stunning experience is proving to be even more valuable. What we'll also talk about is a process that we use here at Lancet in developing our dashboards, and that it takes several key roles and specialized roles to create a great dashboard. And with that, I also have some helpful, intuitive, mobile-related design techniques. I think when you hear them, they'll kind of ring in your ears and say, you'll think, well, yeah, that makes total sense. I think they're obvious when you start thinking about it. So before we get started, I do want to do a quick poll question with you guys, and if you guys could just take a minute and answer the question. We just would like to know if you guys have any graphic designers to help you with your own dashboard development. Great. So it looks like 71% do not. That's not surprising. Good news is there's plenty of graphic designers out there that can help you, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that today on how they can do that for you. So a graphic designer plays an integral part in the BI development dashboard team. So what I was talking about with the roles is it takes several roles and specialized roles to successfully complete a really engaging dashboard. It starts with a solution engineer, basically a person like a project manager that will help you capture the business vision for your dashboard. This should be really step one. Capturing the vision and knowing how you want your dashboard to work, what the dashboard needs to accomplish, is going to help you along the entire development process. It'll help you as long as you stay true to those goals. It'll help you avoid scope creep, and it'll help everybody else kind of stay in line, something to follow. So what you'll get out of it is a dashboard that meets the needs of your end users for the first time, and hopefully you're avoiding scope creep so you won't have extremely expensive development fees, and that having a crystal clear project plan in place and knowing what the dashboard needs to accomplish should be step one. Once we know that and we understand who's going to be using the dashboard, what they're going to be using the dashboard for, what kind of environment they're going to be using the dashboard in, whether it's mobile or web, understanding all those things, your dashboard designer is going to take those tools, and he or she is gonna mix them with your metrics and your information, and design a static but comprehensive design mockup. And I don't mean static in terms of boringness and plainness. I just mean static in terms of something they create in an image program like Photoshop or GIMP. Just something that's going to still look polished and be very close to what your end dashboard is going to look like. It's just not going to have the interactivity your dashboard is going to have. We do it this way because development-wise, it's a lot easier to tweak a mock-up than it is change and tweak a dashboard. And we're finding, in the design process, it's a very iterative process. A designer will come forth with a mock-up, and chances are, the customer's probably going to like 80% of it. But maybe seeing the mock-up, the customer thinks, well, maybe we should have added this metric instead. Maybe we should add this piece of information. Or maybe they're seeing the dashboard actually has too much information. So following that iterative process, what you're going to do is you're going to have work with a designer, and they're going to keep coming up with these static mock-ups and hopefully come up with something fantastic for you. And what this is going to do is it's going to come up with some eye-catching and intuitive visuals that basically are going to help your end users high adoption rates with your end users. Think of it this way: if there is a clumsy tool or something that isn't easy to use and it's not nice to look at, chances are you're not going to want to use it as much. And if there's another process in place that does the same job and is less clumsy and looks better, you're probably going to use that other tool. So you don't want to spend all these hours developing this dashboard that's clumsy and doesn't look good and have people still use spreadsheets. You're going to want to make sure that it is eye-catching, it's engaging, it's intuitive to use. The third role is a BI architect, just somebody to identify the data and the technology and include kind of a data readiness assessment. Basically, we know the goals of the dashboard, we know what we want it to look like. Do we have the data to support it? And if we don't, what kind of blueprint can we scale out so that we can get that information? And lastly, we have the MicroStrategy developer or a dashboard developer, basically somebody that's going to take a combination of the mock-up the dashboard designer came up with, the BI architect, the information they modeled and put into data sets, and construct them in a dashboard and deploy them in your environment. So that's kind of the four roles. You don't necessarily need 4 people to do the 4 roles. Sometimes your dashboard designer can be a developer, and sometimes your BI architect can do the development. But typically we're finding you probably at least still want the team to be 2 or 3 people, whether it's your contracting team or whether you're working with a customer and this kind of teamwork. So these 4 team members, we want to work in this kind of iterative process, and I just want to go over this quickly. One is capturing the business vision again and making sure that you have a clear set of goals. Number 2 would be having your dashboard designer come up with this mock-up. At that point you ask, did this mock-up match the goals? If not, well, let's reiterate. As soon as it matches the goals, we want to make sure we do a data readiness assessment. That's when your architect's going to have assurance to make sure that we have the available data. Is that good? No. Maybe we need to redo the mock-up, or maybe we need to tweak the business vision. Hopefully you don't have to do that, but usually you at least have to redo the mock-up. Then once we complete that, dashboard component construction, that's where your architect or your dashboard developer will build the data sets and make sure those are good. After that, we do the development of the actual dashboard, where we integrate the components, the data sets, along with the dashboard mockup, and we go through sort of a dashboard trial with the customer. And we ask ourselves, does the dashboard meet the vision, the business vision we set? Is it usable? Is it good looking? Is it easy to use? If not, well, maybe we need to tweak the development. 5 and 6 are pretty iterative, and that goes through a long phase, kind of your testing phase, if you will. And once you kind of figure that out, that's when you actually deploy the dashboard into a stable environment, where you deal with users and authentication and all sorts of support maintenance types of things. And we've been following this and kind of tweaking this process here at Lancet the past couple years now with our own dashboard development, and we use it both in mobile and our web dashboards, and we're finding this kind of approach really helps everybody understand what's going on with the dashboard and the next steps to follow. And it's been good. It's been better in terms of scope creep than what we've had in the past. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Secondly, I do have another quick poll question for you guys. Basically, we'd like to know, when developing a mobile dashboard, do you start from scratch, basically just open a new document and go from there, or do you typically have an existing dashboard already, maybe in a web environment that you try to port over, or maybe it's a combination of both, or maybe you haven't touched mobile at all yet? I'm sorry, I guess I was on mute that whole time. Thank you for answering the poll question. I appreciate the feedback. So what I wanted to talk about is our dashboard best practices, and these translate universally, whether you're doing mobile or web or both. These 10 best practices that we talk about at Lancet are definitely good things to follow. And if you haven't again already downloaded our booklet about this, please do so. You can do that at lancetsoftware.com/dashboards, and we'll have a link for that at the end of the webinar too. But what we've talked about, what we're going to talk about in these best practices is something that just translates universally. The first one being design with purpose. We've touched on this already, and I really can't stress it enough. It's number one for a reason. It's knowing what you want your dashboard to do before you do any work on it. It's just knowing the story, knowing who's going to use it, and what information users are going to need are only going to help you in your development process. The second thing is, and very important to mobile, is making sure we plan for all devices. If your application is going to be used for both web and iPad, or web, iPad, and iPhone, I would highly recommend that you do 3 separate dashboards. And the reason is, each one of those devices has its own paradigms, it has its own downfalls, it has its own upticks, and it has its own, rules to follow. So, with that in mind, you definitely want to take advantage of each device's nuance and make sure you leverage it in your own BI dashboard applications. It's true, like in MicroStrategy, we use MicroStrategy for most of our development. You can probably take a web dashboard, provided it doesn't have too many flash widgets, and it would port over to an iPad pretty seamlessly. That's true. However, things like canvas size and legibility, as well as finger size, tap size, these are all things you need to take into consideration. So that's why I would definitely recommend having different apps, as well as the overall design. A web dashboard might be more lighter colored theme, where an iPad or a mobile dashboard might you might want to lean towards more of a darker theme just because it has more of an integrated look and feel. Our third best practice is sticking to the brand. Whether you are the customer or you're working with the customer, chances are you have kind of a brand and a corporate design standard to follow. Chances are there's design templates to follow for PowerPoints, there's design templates to follow for emails, and there's probably a predefined color palette. These customers and companies, they pay millions of dollars to have this branding done for them. And that blue in their logo is not just some ordinary blue. It's a very specific color to the brand identity. And you really want to leverage this into your own design work. So if it's possible, with your customer, or if you are the customer, try to reach out with the marketing team or communications team and get your hands on what we call style guides or corporate style guides, so that you know what color values to follow, and you know what logos to use, and you know how to use them, things like that. What that's going to do for your dashboard, it's going to create this fully integrated look that it already exists, and you want to make sure it stays consistent. The fourth thing, and a very important thing, is empowering decisions. This is more about the data part of it. We want to make sure that, yeah, the dashboard needs to look nice, and it should be looking nice and nice and pretty with nice colors, but the data is the most important part of it, and the data that we're showing needs to tell a story, and it needs to give the user an actionable item. It either helps them draw a conclusion about something, or it gives them proper information, pieces of information to go to their boss or somebody and say, we need to do this about this, and here's why. And you have supportive information for it. So, empowering decisions, that means the dashboard should be easy to use. We shouldn't show more information than that's required. If there's something that's too much information, can we hide it in an information window or a drill down or a separate tab? Things like that. We want to make sure what we show is what's important and to make one decision or make a couple decisions. Basically, we want to make sure we follow the first step, design with purpose. Fifth one is maximizing space. Anybody who's ever done a dashboard knows that you have limited space to work with, and you want to make sure you don't want to waste anything that you don't need, whether it's image or a super large company logo. We want to make sure that the least important visual elements take the least amount of space, and that the most important visual elements are rather easy to read and easy to figure out. Our sixth one, very important, apply the power of one. What that means is we're making sure that critical information fits easily on one screen, and that we don't have to scroll to figure out what's going on with the data in the dashboard. Again, kind of if information can be relocated to a drill-down category, I'd recommend doing that. Now with MicroStrategy, you can use information windows both on web and mobile devices to allow you to drill down and see more information about a particular attribute. Maybe it's a store location or something. Instead of having to show all that information at once, we're showing the high-level detail, the high-level information, and we're giving the user an option to show detail if they want to see it. Want to make sure, too, we arrange the data logically and that the data is telling a story. Users, especially in the western part of the world, they're going to read these dashboards from the top left corner to the right and then move down the next line. So, top to bottom, left to right, and we want to make sure we take advantage of this natural eye movement. So that means if you're going to tell a story, if you want visuals to relate to one another and support each other, tell them in such a way where it makes sense for a person to go left and right, top to bottom, and read them that way. Our eighth thing is keep it simple. A very famous German graphic designer named Dieter Rams once said that he has 10 principles of design, and it being simple and supporting the information, supporting the intake is one of the most important things you can do. You don't want a dashboard to be difficult to use. You want it to be easy, and in fact, you never notice good design until you don't have it. You only notice bad design. You notice bad design because it's frustrating, it's clumsy, and it's not easy to use. So we want to keep it simple. We want to keep it easy to use. We want the user to interact with the dashboard seamlessly without them having to think about how to use it. Our ninth theme is diagramming wisely, and what we mean by that is using appropriate visualization choices like bar graphs or line graphs for the right kinds of data. There's so many graph options we have now with these BI tools. It's kind of, they come out with new ones, and it's kind of cool to play with them, but sometimes they really don't serve a use or purpose to the data you have and the data you need to show. So you need to really think about what's appropriate and what tells the right visual story to your dashboard, to your pieces of information. One thing to keep in mind too is variety is the spice of life, and you don't want to have a dashboard have 9 bar charts, especially when you can mix in maybe some line graphs or some area charts, or maybe even throw in a gauge or a heat map or pie chart, wherever it makes sense. The trick is you want to balance variety with appropriateness. So, having 9 bar graphs on a dashboard is just as bad as having 9 different graph types on a dashboard. And lastly, involving others, that kind of something I already talked about in terms of working with a team, and we had 4 very specialized roles. This really helps you kind of create a well-rounded dashboard where you're attacking it from all levels, design and usability, as well as the data part of it. So I do have very specific mobile design techniques I'd like to talk about. These are more towards Apple's design, Apple's iPad and iPhone. MicroStrategy has recently started supporting Android now, if you guys have started playing around with that. I know the Galaxy Tab 10.1, that's the one that's been, I think, most recognized, and that's the one we've been starting to test with that. So some design techniques for mobile, I'd say follow the 10 best practices I just talked about. You can download it at that link. But it's all about integration and making your mobile dashboard feel like a mobile application, and that it shouldn't feel like a dashboard. It should feel like something that belongs on your iPad or belongs on your Android device, as if you were loading any other application on it. One thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and you should definitely keep in mind, is since now we're using touch devices, your finger size is a lot different than a mouse click. A mouse click is pretty precise, whereas your finger might be big, it might be large, or big and might be small. But Apple kind of thought that 44 pixels, or in MicroStrategy, 0.458 inches, is about the appropriate finger size. So if you have, maybe a list of, or a grid, or you have a graph, you want to make sure that if those are things that we want to tap on, that they're about that size. And, it's not exact science, it's some give and take, but it's something you really need to consider. Apple has their human interface guidelines. If you're going to do a lot of development, it wouldn't hurt to familiarize yourself with some of their recommendations for their own device. And if you think about it, they came out with these guidelines for a very obvious reason, because they're going to have these millions of apps now on their app store developed by thousands of people, but yet they all have kind of a similar integration look and feel. And that is because they enforce, and they're human interface guidelines. They tell you need to have a bottom navigation, they tell you other things, and if your app doesn't follow that, it gets booted and you have to redo it. You have to make sure that it follows these guidelines. Android has their own interface guidelines. You can view those at lancetsoftware.com/ what did we do? UIG, lancetsoftware.com/UIG for user interface guidelines. They have their own guidelines to follow for their applications. So if you're going to design a mobile app for both of those devices, I would definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with them. So the integration part of mobile dashboard is important. I want to make sure that we talk about several different parts of the integration. From a iPad and iPhone standpoint, they use a bottom toolbar, and what that does is it logically separates your mobile application based on different levels of capabilities and functionality. So this is a very simple one. We only have two options. We have home screen and we have a U.S. economy screen. So you'll notice too, it feels and it looks like an iPad toolbar, and if for people that actually develop applications, if their application doesn't have something that feels like this, it gets booted, and you need to make sure we follow this. Not that your application would get booted, but we want to make sure that we're creating this seamless experience for the end user. So like I said, it creates a synchronized look. I'd also recommend using active and inactive icons. As you can see, it seems pretty obvious that even though we can't see the screen, we're on the U.S. economy tab just because it's highlighted as such. These graphics, in case you were wondering, we didn't make them in MicroStrategy. We made this home button, this U.S. economy button, this toolbar, and these logos. We made these in a graphics editing program. Most common one uses Photoshop. Any Adobe tool will do the trick, like Illustrator. People are even using InDesign now for graphics development. So when we get to the demo, you're going to see some graphics, and you might wonder, how did MicroStrategy do this? And the question is, MicroStrategy really didn't. It's a graphic designer that designed what it looks like, and we just imported it into MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy handles the visuals, and they handle it very well, and their visuals look great too. So I want to make that clear distinction right away here. I recommend too, based on kind of you want to make sure that your dashboard sticks to the branding of the customer. To feel free to experiment with your style of this bottom toolbar. It doesn't need to be black. It doesn't need to be gray. It doesn't need to be this blue for the highlight. You can feel free to experiment with the style and the colors, just as long as it's appropriate to what you're designing for. That's kind of the key. The key of design is, don't design something just to design it. Design it to support it, to make it feel like it belongs there. So another good way for integration is on the iPad device, especially. They have what they call information windows, and MicroStrategy utilized this right away in their first iPad release. And what they're great for is modal tasks, such as transaction services now with MicroStrategy. Or you can see in this example, we're actually using it to drill down and see more information about a particular dot on the graph behind it. One thing we found in our development with information windows is that the maximum size should be about a third of the dashboard. And that's about 4 inches wide by 2.5 tall. And that's not an exact science. By all means, you can play around with the different sizes. Why I mention it is sometimes, depending on the selection that the information window is coming from, it might be in a bad spot on the dashboard where the information window will load, but because of the size, it might cut itself off. And all the data is still there in the information window. You basically just got to tap and kind of swipe around and see the information. So it's there. Is it the best? Absolutely not. And I say that just because information should be consumed, at a glance, and you shouldn't have to scroll and kind of swipe around to see just one graph. You're not getting the whole picture. In fact, you're going to be so distracted just trying to see what else is there that you're going to forget at what you were looking at. So in your own development, play around with the size, whatever is appropriate, and whatever works for you, definitely take advantage of it. And one other point is, and they're mentioned in Apple's Human Interface Guidelines, is using consistent UI graphics. And Android has their own UI graphics, but what they are is they're an established icon library that's going to create an integrated look with other applications on the device. And if you have a user that is familiar with using the device, an iPad, iPhone, or an Android device, they're going to see certain icons, and they're going to know what these icons do. So I have 6 examples here for Apple icons. You see, anytime you see this action-looking icon on the top left, you know that that's going to go somewhere, or it might open an information window. You know what to expect without having it say action. Same with this compose icon. If you would ever tap that on a device, you know that you're going to write a new message. It's going to be a new note. It's going to be a new email. You know what you're getting into before you ever tap it. We show a trash can for delete. These horizontal bars kind of symbolize a menu. This icon, more information, that's used quite frequently in our own apps that we develop at Lancet, and I've seen them in a lot of MicroStrategy apps, and you see them all the time in other apps too, as well as this detailed disclosure app. You know when you click on that, it's going to go somewhere. It's going to give you more information, or it's just going to send you somewhere that's relevant. So, kind of going back to the toolbar comments, again, feel free to experiment with the style. It doesn't have to be these exact icons, but as long as it has that same consistency and familiarity, and as long as it's appropriate to the customer and the branding, feel free to use it. And I think you're going to get a more integrated and better experience with your end users. So those are the really quick, simple design techniques for mobile. I do have one last poll question, and then we want to we'll give Peter some time to demo the Teralytics app that we helped develop for them. Oh. Well, thank you for answering the question. Glad to hear that at least you guys are familiar with some of the techniques. Again, I think if you just think about it and you have familiarity with any of these devices, they should make sense at least. Maybe if you haven't heard of them, if you think about it, they hopefully still make sense. These are just as common and as simple as it gets, and I think just adding these in your own mobile development is going to make a world of difference in your own application. So what I'm going to do is, if Peter's ready, we're going to hand over this dashboard demo to him, and he's going to take control, and he's going to show you what we can do here. You there, Peter?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hey, thanks for running through all that. You know, it's fun to see kind of some of the logic that's behind the app that you developed for us. That it all works well. And I'd heard the old adage of, good design fades away, bad design is obvious, but didn't realize some of the things that go into the good design. So it's kind of fun to hear some of that mix and match that you got. So I'll take about 10 minutes here. I'm going to walk through 2 different apps. The first one's going to walk through more of the data that we have. I'll tell you how that applies and how it kind of used. And the second app that we're going to walk through is, part of comparing the store, right? Is we can't share any of our clients' information with you, but we created an artificial business out there that has got stores across the entire United States and can kind of show you how some of this might be able to be used in your applications. So if you're on iPad, go out, download the MicroStrategy app, and Michael, if I misspeak, Mike, if I misspeak, let me know. But from the MicroStrategy app, right, you just kind of, within this gallery here, just pan to the right, and there's an app called United States Economy app. So we'll click on that, right, and that'll load up. Right, very quickly, as Mike mentioned, we're on the home screen. We can click on U.S. Economy, or we can click up here to come through. I'll use this icon on the bottom. Right, and so what we're looking at here is a bubble chart. Right, it shows the U.S. economy from 2005 through July 2011. I'm going to do this in a kind of a few layers that I'm going to start at the national level, right, and give everybody familiarity with what's going on. So to do that, I click on national, right, and I click off of this east, north, central. So I'm just going to have one data point rather than trying to look at 50 or 60 at the same time. What we're looking at here is average wages and employment index. So for July 2011, right, we can see from our normalized point that we started in January of 2005, right, people are getting paid about the same as they were 7 years ago, 6 years ago, but there's more people employed, right? So we'll walk through and what does that look like. I know it can be a little confusing. So here, January 2005, right, we're indexed to 100 and 100. I'll move it to about December 2007, or to it. Right, and then we can see that migration, that the economy in December 2007, right, people were making more money, and they were also, more people were employed. I click on this quickly. What it'll show, right, is, hey, here's what's happening over this time period, and I'll drag it along as well. But we can click on any of these data series, and it's going to tell us exactly, right, what total wages were at that period of time, right, that we clicked on. So I can see this, we're at December 2007, right, at this peak here. Right, but I know the economy is going to dip in 2008, right, came back up, and then we have this double dip and kind of came back down. So I'll close that and just kind of show a few more of those as well. Let's look at April 2009. We'll use May as close enough. So we can see that, hey, you know, wages are going down, employment stayed about the same. We'll go ahead and we'll jump out here to December 2009. Right, and it's moving again. So you get an idea of, right, we're taking snapshots in time represented by the bubble size. We hear a lot about the national economy on the national news, but it's hard to relate our businesses and what's happening in that area. And that's really where we can drill down into a little bit. So I'm going to take national off, and I'm going to click on West, South, Central, and South Atlantic. Right, so we've kind of recovered from all the way from D.C. to Texas. And if we look at, you know, what's happening here, that we can click on Texas, right, and we can say, hey, that's great. You know, from overall total wages have increased up through 2005. Right, they dipped not as much, but then grew again through the end of 2011. All right, let me close this. Let's see if I click on, so if I click and hold it, right, then that'll show me, here's Louisiana. So Louisiana has, right, at the end of the time, 114 is their index, right, employment is greater than it was 7 years ago. Total wages are about $5.5 billion. Let me click on it again, right, and then there's a few, Mike mentioned a few kind of subcategories to look at, right, the pop-up windows. That's probably not the term that Mike used, but that's what I call. Right, and so here, right, we can either swipe and look at total wages. I'll click down here. Mike, maybe you can help me go from total wages to employment index, right? So we can drill down and get more of that information. That in Louisiana, we can see total wages. Now here we can see the index as well. If you're out there, if you're looking at this, right, Louisiana looks a little bit different because in August 2005, that was Hurricane Katrina. So we can definitely see the impact of the economy and how that impacted the business. But right, within a 45-day period, Louisiana wages for the entire state, not just the county level, decreased 8%. Right, and so really, the devastation you hear very much hit it. Almost the 10% of their economy was lost in a single month period. What we can see compared to other parts of the U.S. is, right, from an employment standpoint, Louisiana is doing very well. So not only have they grown from January 2005, right, beyond the Hurricane Katrina impact, that they've created a lot of jobs. We'll also see that they've done a nice job as people are getting paid significantly more than they were getting paid 6-7 years ago. So we can see that impact as well, right? And then we'll look at a quick index. by just taking total wages, so rather than looking at a calculation. So this does a nice job for us of just kind of playing through all those different pieces. Right, I'm going to go ahead and close out of Louisiana, and I'm going to pick on Georgia, right, this peach-colored state right here, and look at what's happening here. So the same thing is that, right, we saw Louisiana was climbing, but here's Georgia has been declining, right? And the same thing if we were to swipe or click on, we can get those same looks. But what I want to show you is that we can drill down even more and look at the county performance. Right, and so here from a county perspective, right, it's all about getting local. Is for us, the national economy is there. It's an average across everything. But if you know exactly what's happening, then you can go and say, hey, do I have a store that's overperforming or underperforming to what's happening, assuming that there's a relationship to the economy. But for those of you who know Atlanta fairly well, this is, I believe, Fulton County. Right, Fulton County is where Atlanta is, kind of the major, right, a lot of the businesses in that area. And you can see how it's performing over time, right? October 2006 had a peak, down through 2009. And Atlanta's really been struggling compared to a lot of the economy. And it's not just Atlanta, it's all in Georgia. Right, but you can see a rebound begin to happen. Now, I want you to keep an eye on this because I'm going to click on DeKalb County, which I believe is this one, right, which is adjacent. It's to the east-northeast of Fulton County in Atlanta. So here's two counties that are touching each other that are going to have a very different look in how they're performing, right? And so that really, from a business perspective, can begin to empower you and say, all right, well, okay, both stores are in the Atlanta MSA or the Atlanta DMA, but they're not going to perform the same, right, assuming that the economy is impacting. Right? And I talked about the economy, right? What we're depicting here are total wages, right? Total wages are great, and people tend to spend what they make. So that's a quick view of this app. I'm running a little behind, so I'm going to click down here on the home screen and take you through the second app, hopefully pretty quick. All right, so we'll do that by coming here to the retail store. Right, and this is a few different views of it. I'll click down here on store comparison. So here's a map of the overall United States. Right, again, I mentioned this is a fictitious company that has stores across the U.S. Right, and very easily, from a graphic standpoint, you can see stores in green that are overperforming. Right, the larger the bubble, the more that they're overperforming their local economy. Stores in red, right, the same thing. They're underperforming the economy, the larger the bubble, the impact. Let's click down here on Miami real quick. So here's Miami-Fort Lauderdale. So clearly, the green line is the Metro Area Economic Index, right, our Teralytics Index. The blue line is store performance. We can see that they're very highly correlated to each other, right? Very similar in what's going on. Click down here, we'll get a couple of views. So that's the view to the overall metro area. Here's a view of how is that store doing to the greater MSA, right, or I'm sorry, to the state. And then we click on the last one. Right. And here's how it's doing to the national economy. Right. So that store is underperforming. So it's very easy to kind of get those quick comparisons of what's happening. Let's click on Tampa St. Pete, and let's come back here to the economy that matches up with that. And what you can see is, right, again, they're very closely correlated. We're indexed to January 2008. But let's take a look at what's happened in the last 10 months. So I can do that by clicking on this bar, right, for the last 12 months, and I can see just by looking at this visual trend line, is hey, my store in Tampa St. Pete is underperforming what it should be because the economy is growing, they're highly correlated. Right? So it might be, hey, I got a store manager who's not doing what I need to do. It might be that I need to do something from a marketing standpoint. But I can very quickly, with this visual, go in and see what's happening, right? And so it becomes very powerful, not only of using the economy, but knowing exactly where to go and where to drill into it. Let's click at another view that kind of summarizes it as well. Right, here's a quick view that says, hey, let's rank and let's take a few different views of, you know, top performing stores by revenue growth from a percentage standpoint, right? Let's look at year-over-year percentage. But then you might say, hey, I want to look at what are some of the worst performing stores out there. Right? So the same thing is, you know, Lance's designed it. So all I've got to do is just swipe and look at it, And now I can say, all right, Clarksville, Tennessee is my worst performing store. Topeka, Kansas isn't doing too well either. And then I can just scroll with this, right, and I can go through that entire list I just ordered based on performance. So, right, the areas that are key for our store here, or for our company, is they can look at total metro areas, they can look at stores, and kind of get any comparison very quickly at their fingertips to what that performance is. And again, right, it's all about having the knowledge and being efficient with the application of that knowledge. So, Mike, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add. I kind of ran through some of those things there.
No, I think the whole point is, I think it feels like a mobile application. It's so much stress. It feels like it belongs on the device. And we're giving users information, both high level and detail, but in such a way where the detail isn't overwhelming because the user is controlling how much detail they want to see, the granularity, basically.
Absolutely. And something, as I mentioned earlier, this has been for us to help show people, some of these large companies, they grasp the idea of, yes, I understand every economy is different, but it's hard to grasp that because it's never something we've really been able to measure. And this does a nice job of kind of visualizing both, from a graph standpoint, and then we can drill down all the way to a table form here and just say, okay, here's the exact number of what's happening.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Well, thank you, Peter.
My pleasure.
So, basically, okay, that was it for the demo, and I appreciate it. So that pretty much caps off our presentation. I want to make it clear that this is something that, as Peter showed you, this is something Lancet does, and Teralytics, they use this app for their own reasons and their own good for the business they do, and they do a good job at what they do with predictive analytics. And we work with many customers around the nation here, now even around the world, doing this kind of mobile development and being able to work with you to come up with solutions. So if this is something you're interested in or would like to hear more about it, you can email us at info@lancetsoftware.com or give us a call at 952-230-7396. Or we also have more information on our website. So again, I'm Mike Erickson, and that was Peter Seifert from Teralytics. We had some questions during this, if this would be available later. We are recording this webinar, and probably in the next week or a few days, we'll post it at lancetsoftware.com/webinars, and you can look for it then. And we'll send out an email to those who have attended just to let you know that we have that. So if there are, I see some questions here. I can go through them one by one. If you have any questions, feel free to use the question part of the screen. So I do have a question about the data and the functionality. Let me see, the same data. So I think the question is, if you have a web dashboard and the data and the functionality transports over to the iPad, how will that look? It will look largely like what you have on the web. It depends if your canvas size is either too tall or too short or too wide. What's going to happen with your iPad is it's going to actually stretch, and on the iPad you're going to have to tap and drag and move it around just to see what the dashboard looks like. So you're probably, if it's too large at any height or width, you're not going to get a good picture. So if you do want to port it over and just to see what it looks like, give it a try, and you might have to play around with the height and width and rearrange some elements, but it's definitely its own design nuance. In the dashboard survival guide that I mentioned before, that you can download at lancetsoftware.com/dashboards, I do have details about dimensions for the iPad as well as the iPhone. With the new iPad that came out and now the Android devices that are being supported by MicroStrategy, we are going to release a new dashboard survival guide sometime here in the next month, I think, with updated canvas sizes and considerations to keep in mind. We have a question about creating separate versions for web and iPad, and if we usually have to do that. Most of the time, I'd probably say about 90% of the time, yes, our customers ask for that specifically, and the other 10% of the time, we're pretty much able to talk them into it. And I say that just because they had their own design nuances. MicroStrategy Web is getting a lot closer to match mobile in terms of information windows and modal views and tasks. If you have MicroStrategy 921, you can now load an information window and get more detail about a particular attribute or a metric from a grid. And in 921M and going forward, you're going to be able to do the same functionality from a graph, much like you would be able to do in a mobile version. And Peter showed you that with the bubble chart, as you would tap on the bubble and you could see more information related to that particular state. New versions of MicroStrategy are finally being able to leverage that in the web versions. I think that was one of the biggest differentiators. Another big one is if you want to use Google Maps. Google Maps, because of its integration with Apple devices, it is a built-in functionality, and you don't need a separate license key. But if you want to run Google Maps, on the web, it requires you to purchase a Google API key, which is expensive, and it only ties to one server. So if you have multiple servers, you need multiple licenses. And if map implementation is something that's important to you, that might be a hard thing to get around, and mobile might be the better way to go. But otherwise, usually, yes, we do create separate versions for web and iPad, separate physical documents. Okay, we have another question about if I would recommend any particular websites or books, resources on dashboards and information design. I do have a few. There's a fellow named Brian Brandow. He's definitely a MicroStrategy expert. If you follow MicroStrategy on LinkedIn, he does a lot of comments on threads. He has his own website, his own blog about MicroStrategy, and he comments about dashboarding, mobile implementation. He does a lot of MicroStrategy administration stuff. His website is Brian Brandow, one word, that's BRYANBRANDOW. BRYANBRANDOW. Brian Brandow. Another one is Stephen Few. If you're familiar with Stephen Few, he is a information design expert and comments a lot about this stuff. He has his own blog, and that is perceptualedge.com. He also has a book that I recommend called Information Dashboard Design. I mentioned that book in my Dashboard Survival Guide booklet. It's definitely a great read. He talks a lot about kind of the same best practices I talked about. In fact, that's where I get a lot of my information from, and I just did my own take on it, is what Stephen Few talks about. He definitely knows his stuff when it comes to information and dashboard design. So that would be my resources there.